Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Boy, we got really a very interesting guest with us today, and what an honor to have with us Randy Lewis. He's former Vice President of Walgreens. He's also a Peace Corps volunteer, was named one of Fortune's 50 executives. And during his time and his tenure there at Walgreens, he was head of the logistics division for 16 years, when the chain grew from about 1,500 stores up to about 8,000 stores. But during that time, Randy introduced an exclusive model in Walgreens distribution centers that resulted in 10% of its workforce consisting of people with disabilities who are held to the same standards as those without disabilities. He's also authored a terrific book, and let me encourage you to get a copy of it, entitled No Greatness Without Goodness. Hi, Randy. Nice to have you today.
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, fascinating story. And I don't know, maybe you can tell us, how did you move into this area of working with disabilities?
How did we move into that area? Well, I have a son with autism that kind of exposed me to that world that I would have never been exposed to otherwise. So through watching my son grow up, I got to know that community, and I got to know the challenges, and I got to know some of the opportunities in my role at work. So it seemed like those two things would come together at the right time. So
wow. So how did you introduce this to Walgreens? Were they open to this idea?
Certainly, I think that's one of the fortunate things of the company we work for. We had tried on a limited basis. We brought in people, and they call it enclaves, where you contract with an outside agency, and they come in and do a part of the work. We tried that. We tried working with the school systems, but it never seemed to be big enough. It never made a big enough impact, or it was always them versus us. They were never part of the workforce, and we were building this new center in Brown. It was going to open in about 2007, and we said, this is the time to really kind of go big. And that's what we did. It worked out a lot better than we ever thought.
Wow. Well, during those beginning days, was it tough persuading Walgreens? I mean, this is quite a vision.
Well, you know, it's interesting. The wonderful thing I observed about this, there is a longing in each of us to make a difference. And I think everybody related to this. I remember when we announced it to the store managers, and we had a room full of 5,000 store managers, and I was telling them what we're going to do. And when I started talking about this big center, they weren't interested at all. But when I started talking about we were going to have 1/3 of the workforce people with disabilities, the room got quiet. And then at the end, I asked everybody who knew somebody or held somebody in their heart with a disability to stand up. And people started standing up. The room got very quiet. And the only sound was people rising from their seat. It was probably 1,000 people stood up. And then it wasn't my story, it was our story.
Wow. How did your faith play into this? I mean, how did you feel in your heart this is what God wanted you to do?
You know, that people have asked me, that's kind of like asking the fish, what's the water like? I can't separate it. It's all part of it. It's there to be reminded that the splendor of all this creation and how we're connected and how we count on each other. And I always have to look to Jesus to see, you know, what's inclusion really about? Mm-hmm. You know, this wasn't that far a reach. So, I mean, that message always was there. And knowing that there was a lot of comfort knowing that you're going to do the right thing. It's one thing when you do something risky and it's about your self-interest. It's a lot easier to do when it's for other people.
All right. Now, being the corporate executive that you are, did you come up with the business plan, or was this kind of like, let's start it and see where it goes?
Well, the gosh honest truth, there weren't any models out there for us to follow. Mm-hmm. And we knew if we got started and started doing all this planning, and going through all the things that could go wrong, we'd never get started.
Right, right.
So the standard was, we're going to make mistakes just like we do in all aspects of business. And when we make mistakes, we correct mistakes. So the standard is, we're going to, here's a standard performance. If we can't do it, we can say to the world, nobody can.
Wow.
Take away the fear.
Let's go back to that moment where you asked everybody to stand in the room. I find that fascinating. I would assume that was the open door moment. And what do you think they were envisioning in their own hearts and minds as to what this would mean in co-workers having disabilities?
Well, the people in that room, I don't think they thought about it. I think they were caught up in the moment of what's possible.
Great.
Before those moments came. And a lot of people, when I hear questions like that, what are the people without disabilities going to think? That's really stems from fear, because most of the time you ask that person, well, what do you think? Mm-hmm. They say, I'll be fine. But it's the other people, but really it's their own fears. So we had a little bit of that, and we addressed it. We just said, every day the center manager would come in and bring all his leaders and say, I know there's some questions out there that you're afraid to ask, so we'd have them write it down and put it in a hat and then pass it around and answer one at a time. And some of them he didn't have the answers.
You say that the goal was to those with disabilities to work with the same standards as those who didn't, same hours. How did that go over?
That went over well with everybody. It went over well with the shareholders. It went over well with the board. And I think that's how everybody was able to get on in that part of the head part. You know, we say the longest distance in the world is from here to here.
Yeah, right.
So we had to get through that part too. So the presentation to the board of directors, when we asked for this, I think the building was $180 million. So it was a large investment, and nobody had ever done this with intent on a production mission critical type of thing.
Right. And
they asked, what happens if it doesn't work? And the answer was real simple. We'll adjust.
All right. So how's it going?
Well, our target was 1/3 of the workforce, and we aimed too low. Wow. In that first building, it's now 40%. And in the second building we opened up is 50%. And we thought it would be about all this great automation and technology that we had in there that would enable that workforce. What we found out, it wasn't about the technology. So all our other centers, our other 20 centers came in, and they said, we want this too. So they agreed to spread this throughout the entire logistics division and make a goal of 10% of the workforce in 5 years, which they did with, they got a bump with the Great Recession, but they made it in 5 years and 3 months.
This is just fascinating. I can't imagine the turnaround that you have made in the lives of those who otherwise thought they would never be able to work in a capacity like that.
We certainly have changed lives in that regard, in wonderful ways. But the most incredible thing, and the reason we got so excited after we were successful, is the impact it had on the people without disabilities across the board.
Really?
There's a sense of engagement, teamwork, purpose that we've never seen. And when people come in from the outside, that's what they see. They don't see people with disabilities. As a matter of fact, they ask, where are all those people with disabilities? We're out there doing the job, just like anybody. But what they see is they talk to management and they say, my job now, sure, it's always been about production. You can't ever take that away. But they say, my number one job now is to make everybody around me successful. And when you have an environment like that, that's not just for people with disabilities. You don't turn that off one way or the other. That's across the board, and everybody sees that and they respond.
I would assume you changed the whole culture of Walgreens with this program.
Well, with 240,000 people, it's kind of hard, in 8,000 different locations. That would be a bit of a stretch, but I think we've changed one corner of it that's infectious in a positive way.
Wow. Now, have other corporations looked in?
Yes, they have. We have lots of visitors, and one of the things that we did, and I think this is the thing I've learned about doing good. You've got to give it away. the power is in the giving it away, and the joy is giving away. We didn't do this thing to have some corporate secret that's going to give us an edge, and people keep wanting to ask us if that's what we did it for. No, we did it because it was the right thing to do, and guess what? It's good for everybody. So we've opened our doors even to our competitors, and they've come in and they've seen that this go forward. So a lot of companies have brought it forward, and I think. A lot of companies come. Lowe's is doing this. Meyer, P&G,
Wow.
Smith Klein Beecham. We have a Marks and Spencer, Britain's largest retailer,
Wow.
doing this. A company in Brazil has come. I was just in Sweden. Their largest grocer is going to do this too.
That's wonderful. Let me take a quick break here, Randy. I want to come back and then get into your book a little bit, No Greatness Without Goodness. Randy Lewis with us today. Fascinating story of what he's done there at Walgreens now that's taken off across the world. So we'll be right back. Well, welcome back, and we're talking to Randy Lewis. I'm just fascinated with his story, and he's former senior vice president of Walgreens, and he introduced an exclusive model in the Walgreens distribution centers of working with people with disabilities, and now has become a major part of their workforce in Walgreens. This model now has spread across the country and around the world. He's authored a book called No Greatness Without Goodness. And Randy, I love your motto. What's the use of having power if you don't use it for good? God bless you. That is terrific. Why did you write this book? What do you want it to do?
Well, I wanted, at the end of your career, you look back and certainly you look back at your accomplishments and you're proud of those, but really I've discovered, and I think most people I've talked to, what gives us the most satisfaction is who helped us and who did we help. So this was kind of written as about my journey, and everybody's journey is unique, but maybe it'd be useful to somebody along theirs. And the second reason, I wanted to remind everybody that there are not two lives we live, one at work and one in the community or one in our church community. It's all one life, and it can be integrated. And we can be excellent in one phase and also be engaged in the community to make this world a better place. Those are not those are not either or answers, and we proved that over and over again. So that was.
I'm hearing this. I'm hearing some kind of a cultural shift in corporate life. I interviewed Peter Strobel the other day, and his whole motive now is to have corporations do exactly what you're writing about. What's the use of having all this power and money if you're not going to use it for good? And his question to CEOs: do you love people?
Right.
Something's happening. Do you sense it out there?
Oh, I certainly hope so. And it's time. They say the biggest influences in culture now is media and business. Right. So we has a tremendous responsibility. The awesome responsibility of power. It's incredible, and it's overwhelming, and also very empowering.
Yeah. Now back to this program. A little bit on the corporate side. Was the ROI there? Did the board look at this and say the ROI is there, investing into these distribution centers and a major portion of the workforce being people with disabilities?
Certainly. And matter of fact, the presentation was essentially this. This will be our most expensive building, our most effective and efficient building, and the best return on investment. And that's because of the building, and the performance is going to be the same between people with disabilities and without. A lot of people start down this road that every person with a disability has to be like Jackie Robinson. They have to be better. They keep looking for better. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be the same. That's what we learn. They're the same as far as performance. Now, we found out, surprisingly, they work safer. That's a group of people who have better retention with and less absenteeism, but the performance is the same, and that's fine.
Wow. So, those who don't have disabilities, working alongside of those who do, I would imagine there's a tremendous amount of mentoring going on here.
Exactly. They're more engaged. People without disabilities will say they will never transfer to another building, although we've had people transfer across the country just to be part of this.
Wow.
I had a woman call me up when we were opening up Anderson, who worked in one of our stores in Wisconsin. She said, I'd like to come there and maybe if I could be a supervisor, I'm running a store. And I said, well, it's too late for that. We're opening another building in Connecticut in a couple of years. She moved her family all the way across the country to Connecticut for the chance to hire on to be part of it.
Wow. So how many distribution centers do you have now?
20.
20. And how many employees at these centers?
About 10,000 total, probably 1,100, maybe a little bit north of that, people with disabilities, over 10% of the workforce now.
Now, other agencies that work with people with disabilities, I'm thinking Salvation Army or any of the medical communities, they must look to you, your organization, as incredibly therapeutic.
Well, in this community, we got to provide each other hope. The thing is, we say about each other, we're in the same orchestra, we're just playing in different sections.
Yeah.
And it's how we make music together. There's a lot of parts that come together to make this successful.
Back to the board just for a moment. Obviously, at the beginning days, they might have been a little frightened here. What do they think now?
Well, the only thing the board has said to me since then, we took them for a tour. All they said was thank you.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Randy, what's next for you? I mean, this is incredible. It seems like you've got something here that a lot of companies can glean from.
This one, you go through all your life looking for purpose, and everybody wants to look for their call.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing a story, and I think it came from Zen. It was a student asking his master, he says, will all these exercises make me enlightened? And he says, well, it has about as much impact as you making the sunrise in the morning. And the student says, well, why am I going through all these exercises? And he says, so you'll be awake when the sun does rise.
Wow.
So that's what this happened for me. I didn't go looking for this opportunity, but I thank God I saw it and recognized it when it came. And that's what I'll probably do, is help others.
Is there
like that.
That's fascinating. Is there a possibility of a smaller model for this?
When you say a smaller model, you mean less than 10% or those kind of things?
Well, for smaller companies. I mean, Walgreens obviously fairly good size, but I mean, companies that may be running just maybe 50 employees, is there a model here for them to glean from?
Oh, most certainly. And as a matter of fact, most of the models we saw were small. We're small business people. They're closer to the work. It's harder in a larger company, surprisingly. Most of the models we see in this country, when we started, were small entrepreneurial businesses. There's a fellow named Phil Kozar in Cossack in North Carolina who credits hiring people with disabilities with saving his business. And I think he has less than 30 employees total. And there's a fellow in Chattanooga, the same thing. Most of his employees have a disability, are recent immigrants, or released from prison. And he has one of the most productive workforces and competes across the world with that workforce, small business.
Wow. All right, all this started with you trying to see life through your son's eyes. And what have you learned from this?
What have I learned? Well, for my son taught me to look past a person and see the uniqueness of what they are. It's easy to stop and see a person on the surface. He's taught me by seeing him, I've been able to see others in that regard. Most of the time, I'm very judgmental. First time, my impression is to judge and to remind myself, if I'm judging, I'm not loving. And all I have to do is look at the example of my son. We are not as we appear. We each fight a hard battle each day.
Randy, you're an inspiration, and I want you to get a copy of his book, and especially you business owners, No Greatness Without Goodness, Randy Lewis. There's a picture up there on the screen for those watching on the Dove TV, and I'm sure you can get it at Barnes & Noble. Check it out at Amazon.com. Randy, thank you. Thank you for following your heart. You're something that just reiterates what I often share, and that is whatever God saves you from or brings you through, you end up being a minister to, and that's exactly what you did. And you did it to thousands. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Have a great day, my friend.
You too.
Okay, God bless. We'll be right back.